Sarah Mitchell checked her watch for the third time as her luxury SUV pulled up to a light private aviation's terminal. It was 7:15 a.m. on a crisp Tuesday morning, and the rising sun cast long shadows across the tarmac where several private jets gleamed in the early light. At 42 years old, Sarah had worked relentlessly to build her tech company, SecureFlow Solutions, from a small startup to a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Today marked a significant milestone, her first time chartering a private jet for a crucial meeting with potential investors in Chicago. She had always flown commercial business class before, but this meeting could change everything for her company, and she wanted to arrive fresh and prepared. Sarah adjusted her navy blue blazer and smoothed down her carefully pressed slacks. Her natural hair was styled in a professional updo, and her minimal jewelry reflected her practical yet polished approach to business. The leather briefcase in her hand contained her laptop and the presentation she had spent weeks perfecting. "This is it," she whispered to herself, taking a deep breath. Her assistant, Jenny, had handled all the arrangements, ensuring every detail was perfect. The confirmation emails and documentation were safely stored in her phone, and she had arrived the recommended 2 hours early for her 9:30 a.m. flight. As she approached the terminal's entrance, Sarah noticed a security guard watching her intently through the glass doors. Something about his gaze made her uncomfortable, but she dismissed the feeling. After 15 years in the business world, she had learned to navigate spaces where she was often the only black person in the room. The terminal's interior was all sleek marble and soft lighting, with comfortable leather seating areas and a coffee bar that would rival any high-end cafe. A few other travelers sat in various corners, some engrossed in their phones, others engaged in quiet conversation. The sound of Sarah's heels echoed slightly as she walked across the polished floor. James Weber, the security guard who had been watching her, stood up straighter as she approached the security checkpoint. He was a man in his 50s with graying hair and a weathered face that seemed permanently set in a frown. His name tag gleamed under the terminal's sophisticated lighting system. "Good morning," Sarah said professionally, reaching for her identification and flight documentation. "I'm here for the 9:30 flight to Chicago." Her voice carried the confidence of someone accustomed to navigating corporate environments. Weber's response was immediate and sharp. "This is a private aviation terminal, ma'am." His emphasis on private carried an unmistakable tone that made several nearby passengers look up from their phones. Sarah maintained her composure, having encountered similar situations before. "Yes, I'm aware. I have a chartered flight booked through Elite Aviation. Here are my documents." She held out the papers Jenny had prepared, along with her identification. Weber didn't take them. Instead, he crossed his arms and looked past her toward the door. "Do you have any idea how much these flights cost? This isn't the commercial terminal. That's 2 buildings over." A few feet away, a businessman lowered his newspaper, watching the interaction with growing concern. A young woman at the coffee bar had already taken out her phone, though she tried to be discreet about it. "I'm fully aware of the costs," Sarah replied, her voice steady but firm. "I'm the CEO of SecureFlow Solutions, and I have all the necessary documentation right here. Would you please verify my booking?" "CEO?" Weber's skepticism was palpable. He glanced at her ID, but made no move to check it against the system. "Look, I've worked here for 12 years. I know our usual clients. Maybe there's been some misunderstanding on your part." Sarah felt her heart racing, but years of dealing with prejudice in the business world had taught her to maintain her professional demeanor. She took out her phone and pulled up the confirmation emails, including correspondence with Elite Aviation's booking department. "There's no misunderstanding," she stated clearly. "I have a confirmed booking, and I'm sure if you check the system, you'll find everything in order. I would appreciate it if you would do your job and verify my documentation rather than making assumptions." The situation was escalating, and Sarah could feel the eyes of other passengers on her. Some looked uncomfortable, others angry, and a few had their phones out, recording the interaction. What should have been a proud moment, her first private jet flight after years of building her company, was turning into yet another battle against prejudice. But Sarah Mitchell had never been one to back down from a fight for her rights. The tension in the private terminal grew thicker as James Weber continued to stand between Sarah and the security checkpoint. His body language became more aggressive, and his voice carried a bitter edge that echoed through the marble-floored space. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," Weber said, placing his hand on his radio. "This is a secure facility, and I don't believe you have legitimate business here." His fingers tapped impatiently against the radio, ready to call for backup. Sarah felt her face grow warm, but she kept her voice steady. "I will not leave. I have a confirmed booking, and I'm asking you once again to check the system." She held up her phone, showing the email confirmation from Elite Aviation. The booking number was clearly visible on the screen. A small crowd had gathered now, maintaining a respectful distance but watching the scene unfold. Among them was Michael Torres, another security guard who had just arrived for his shift. He stood near the coffee bar, frowning as he observed his colleague's behavior. "Listen here." Weber stepped closer to Sarah, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "I don't know how you got in here, but these jets cost thousands per hour. The kind of people who fly private." He paused, his eyes scanning her expensive but professional attire with obvious disdain. "Well, they're different." Sarah's grip tightened on her briefcase. "Different how, Mr. Weber?" she asked, deliberately using his name from his badge. "I'd very much like you to explain exactly what you mean by different." The businessman who had been watching earlier stood up, phone in hand, recording the interaction. At that moment, a young woman in an Elite Aviation uniform hurried over. Her name tag identified her as Jessica Chen, customer service representative. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, looking between Sarah and Weber with concern. "Yes," Sarah replied calmly. "Mr. Weber is refusing to verify my booking or allow me through security. I'm Sarah Mitchell, CEO of Secure Flow Solutions, and I have a 9:30 flight to Chicago." Jessica's eyes widened in recognition. "Ms. Mitchell, I handled your booking correspondence yesterday. I'm so sorry for this situation." She turned to Weber, her professional demeanor barely masking her anger. "Mr. Weber, this is absolutely unacceptable. Ms. Mitchell is a verified client." Weber's face reddened, but he stood his ground. "Protocol requires thorough verification. We can't be too careful these days. She could have stolen those documents or—" "Stolen?" Sarah interrupted, her composure finally cracking slightly. "Would you like to see my company website? It articles about me in Business Weekly. My LinkedIn profile with over 100,000 followers? Or perhaps you'd like to call any of our Fortune 500 clients." More phones were out now, recording the incident. A distinguished-looking older man in an expensive suit approached the group. "I've seen enough," he said firmly. "I'm Jonathan Pierce, executive board member of Elite Aviation. I was having coffee over there and couldn't help but witness this disgraceful display." Weber's face went pale. "Sir, I was just following security protocols." "No, you are not." Pierce cut him off sharply. "You are profiling Ms. Mitchell and making assumptions based on nothing but prejudice. This is not what Elite Aviation stands for." Jessica quickly stepped forward with a tablet. "Ms. Mitchell, let me verify your documentation right away. I'm so terribly sorry for this experience." Her fingers flew across the screen as she pulled up Sarah's booking information. Weber stood awkwardly to the side, his earlier confidence deflating under Pierce's stern gaze. The other security guard, Torres, finally approached. "I'll take over the checkpoint, James. I think you need to report to HR." Sarah watched as Weber's face cycled through various emotions: anger, embarrassment, defiance, and finally, a grudging acceptance of his situation. He turned and walked away, but not before muttering something under his breath that made several nearby passengers gasp. As Jessica processed her documentation, Sarah noticed that videos of the incident were already being shared on social media. What had started as a simple check-in for her first private flight had turned into something much bigger, a stark reminder that success and achievement didn't shield anyone from prejudice. But as she stood there, surrounded by supportive strangers and apologetic staff, Sarah realized this incident would have consequences far beyond her delayed check-in. The wheels of change were already in motion, sparked by one guard's bigotry and the technology that made such incidents impossible to ignore. As Jessica processed Sarah's documentation, the private terminal buzzed with activity. Several passengers had gathered nearby, many still recording with their phones. The incident was spreading across social media platforms like wildfire, with hashtags #EliteAviation and #FlyingWildBlack already trending. Among the witnesses was Rachel Thompson, a popular social media influencer with millions of followers. She had been quietly sipping her morning coffee when the confrontation began. Now, she was live streaming the aftermath to her audience, providing real-time commentary on what she had witnessed. "What happened here this morning was absolutely unacceptable," Rachel spoke into her phone camera. "I watched this successful businesswoman be profiled and harassed simply for existing in this space." Her followers were responding in real time, with messages of support and outrage flooding her stream. Jonathan Pierce, the executive board member, was now engaged in an intense phone conversation a few feet away. His face was stern as he paced back and forth, occasionally glancing at Sarah with apologetic looks. The words "immediate termination" and "press statement" could be heard from his conversation. Sarah stood tall, maintaining her dignity as Jessica completed the security verification process. Her phone was buzzing constantly with notifications. News of the incident had reached her assistant Jenny, her board members, and various business contacts. The video clips were spreading rapidly across different platforms. "Ms. Mitchell," Jessica said softly, "everything is verified now. Would you like me to escort you to the private lounge? We've upgraded your flight package to our premium service at no additional cost." Her face showed genuine concern and embarrassment over the situation. Before Sarah could respond, an elderly white couple approached her. The woman, elegantly dressed in designer clothes, touched Sarah's arm gently. "Dear, we saw everything," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "My husband and I have been flying private for 30 years, and we'd never seen such disgusting behavior. We're so sorry this happened to you." Her husband, a distinguished-looking man in his 70s, nodded in agreement. "We've already called our attorney. We'd be happy to provide witness statements if you decide to take legal action." Other passengers murmured in agreement, several offering their contact information as potential witnesses. Michael Torres, the security guard who had replaced Weber, was now efficiently processing Sarah's security check. His professionalism and courtesy stood in stark contrast to Weber's earlier behavior. "Ms. Mitchell, you're all clear," he said respectfully. "Again, on behalf of the security team, I deeply apologize for my colleague's actions." As Sarah gathered her belongings, a young black pilot in an elite aviation uniform approached her. "Ms. Mitchell," he said quietly, "I'm Captain Marcus Johnson. I'll be flying your plane today. What happened here?" He paused, emotion evident in his voice. "It resonates with many of us who work in this industry. Thank you for standing your ground." The terminal manager, a middle-aged woman named Patricia Roberts, rushed in through the main entrance. She had been called in early due to the incident. "Ms. Mitchell," she called out, slightly out of breath, "please, may I have a moment of your time? We need to address this situation properly." Sarah checked her watch. Despite the ordeal, she was still on schedule for her Chicago meeting. She nodded to Patricia, understanding that this moment was bigger than just her experience. It was an opportunity for real change in an industry that had long struggled with diversity and inclusion. Around them, the other passengers were sharing their video footage on various platforms. The incident was being picked up by local news stations, and calls were coming in from national media outlets. The story was growing beyond the confines of the private terminal, becoming a symbol of the ongoing struggle against systemic racism in exclusive spaces. Jonathan Pierce finished his phone call and approached Sarah again. "Ms. Mitchell, our CEO would like to speak with you when you have a moment. We're not just going to apologize. We want to work with you to ensure nothing like this ever happens again in our facilities." As Sarah followed Jessica toward the private lounge, she could feel the weight of the moment. What had started as a simple business trip had transformed into something far more significant. The support from strangers, the quick action from management, and the viral spread of the incident were creating a perfect storm for change. In her heart, she knew that her response to this discrimination would help pave the way for others who might face similar situations in the future. Inside the private lounge, Sarah sat in a plush leather chair as Patricia Roberts, the terminal manager, paced anxiously before her. The elegant room, designed for luxury and comfort, had become an impromptu crisis management center. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Sarah's chartered jet waited on the tarmac, its white exterior gleaming in the morning sun. "Ms. Mitchell, we've reviewed the security footage," Patricia said, her hands clasped tightly together. "What Mr. Weber did, it wasn't just unprofessional. It was discriminatory and completely against everything Elite Aviation stands for. She paused, looking at her tablet. And now the footage has gone viral. We're receiving calls from CNN, MSNBC, and other major networks. Sarah took a sip of the premium coffee Jessica had brought her. "This isn't just about me," she said firmly. "How many others has Mr. Weber turned away? How many didn't have the resources or platform to fight back?" As if to emphasize her point, Sarah's phone buzzed with another notification. The videos had now reached several prominent civil rights activists and celebrities. #Justice for Sarah Mitchell was trending nationwide, with hundreds of thousands of people sharing their own experiences of discrimination in luxury spaces. Suddenly, the lounge door opened and James Weber burst in, his face red with anger. Behind him, security officers rushed to intercept him. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. 20 years of service, and I'm being fired because some woman couldn't handle basic security procedures." Captain Marcus Johnson, who had been reviewing flight plans nearby, immediately stepped between Weber and Sarah. Michael Torres, the other security guard, grabbed Weber's arm. "James, you need to leave. Now." Weber struggled against Torres's grip. "You're ruining my life," he yelled at Sarah. "I was doing my job. I have a family to support." Sarah remained seated, her face calm but resolute. "Your job was to verify my credentials, Mr. Weber. Instead, you chose to make assumptions based on the color of my skin. The consequences you're facing are the result of your actions, not mine." Several phones were recording again as Weber was escorted out, his shouts echoing down the hallway. Patricia looked mortified. "Ms. Mitchell, I can't begin to express. This is absolutely—" "What's important now," Sarah interrupted gently, "is how Elite Aviation moves forward. This isn't just a PR crisis, it's an opportunity for real change in private aviation." Jonathan Pierce entered the lounge, followed by two members of Elite Aviation's legal team. "Ms. Mitchell, our CEO is on a video call. Would you be willing to speak with her briefly before your flight?" On a large screen in the lounge's conference area, Elena Rodriguez, CEO of Elite Aviation, appeared. Her face showed genuine concern and determination. "Ms. Mitchell, I'm deeply sorry for what you experienced today. We're taking immediate action. Mr. Weber has been terminated, but that's just the beginning. We want to work with you to develop comprehensive anti-bias training programs for all our facilities." Sarah leaned forward. "Ms. Rodriguez, I appreciate that, but training isn't enough. We need systemic change. My company, Secure Flow Solutions, specializes in security systems that eliminate bias from verification procedures. Perhaps we could discuss implementing something similar across your terminals." Elena's eyes lit up with interest. What had started as a crisis was evolving into an opportunity for both companies. "That's exactly the kind of innovative solution we need. Would you be open to meeting when you return from Chicago?" As the call ended, Captain Johnson approached Sarah. "Ms. Mitchell, we're ready for takeoff whenever you are. Your flight plan has been cleared with priority status." Sarah stood, gathering her briefcase. The events of the morning had been exhausting, but she felt a sense of purpose. Her phone showed thousands of messages of support, including ones from young black entrepreneurs thanking her for standing her ground. As she walked toward the terminal's private exit, other passengers stood in respect. The elderly couple from earlier gave her encouraging smiles. Rachel, the influencer, was still live streaming, her commentary now focused on the positive changes this incident might bring to the industry. Sarah paused at the door, looking back at the terminal where, just hours ago, she had faced such blatant discrimination. Now, that same space held the promise of transformation. As she walked onto the tarmac, the morning sun warm on her face, she knew that her first private flight would be remembered not for the prejudice she encountered, but for the change it would inspire. As Sarah's private jet soared above the clouds toward Chicago, the incident at Elite Aviation's terminal was creating waves across social media and news platforms. Rachel Thompson's live stream had been viewed over 1 million times, and major news networks were running the story in their headlines. Sarah's phone buzzed continuously with notifications. Her PR team had been monitoring the situation and sent her a detailed report. The video clips showed different angles of the confrontation, each one adding to the growing outrage. Comments flooded in from people of all backgrounds, sharing their own experiences of discrimination in luxury spaces. "Look at this," Sarah murmured to herself, scrolling through her feed. A prominent black actress had shared the video with a powerful message. "This is what we face every day, even when we've made it. Thank you, Sarah Mitchell, for showing us how to stand up with dignity." Jenny, her assistant, had organized an emergency virtual meeting with SecureFlow's board of directors. Using the jet's secure Wi-Fi, Sarah connected to the video call. The faces of her board members filled the screen, their expressions a mix of concern and determination. "Sarah," began Marcus Chen, her lead investor, "this incident is unfortunate, but you've handled it masterfully. The public response is overwhelming. We've received partnership inquiries from 3 major airlines and several luxury hotel chains in the last hour alone." Another board member, Diana Williams, spoke up. "Elite Aviation stock has dropped 5% since the videos went viral. Their competitors are already reaching out to us about implementing our bias-free security systems. This could be a turning point for SecureFlow." As the meeting continued, Sarah's phone displayed a text from her mother. "Baby, I just saw the videos. Your father would have been so proud of how you handled yourself. You're changing things, just like he always said you would." Sarah felt tears welling up, remembering how her late father had always encouraged her to break barriers. The luxury cabin of the private jet suddenly felt very quiet as Sarah reflected on the morning's events. A flight attendant approached with fresh coffee. "Ms. Mitchell," she said softly, "I hope you don't mind, but our entire crew watched what happened. You're trending on every platform. You're inspiring so many people. Indeed, the hashtags #Sarah Mitchell and #BlackExcellence were dominating social media. Corporate leaders were issuing statements about diversity and inclusion. Black celebrities were sharing their own stories of discrimination in luxury spaces. The conversation was expanding beyond one incident to address systemic issues in high-end services. Sarah's phone rang. It was Elena Rodriguez, CEO of Elite Aviation, again. "Ms. Mitchell, I've been monitoring the situation. Major shareholders are demanding immediate action. Would you consider joining our board's Diversity and Inclusion Committee? We need voices like yours to drive real change." Before Sarah could respond, another notification appeared. The video had caught the attention of civil rights organizations. The National Urban League had issued a statement calling for industry-wide changes in private aviation services. They wanted to use this incident as a catalyst for broader reforms. Rachel Thompson's latest update showed that James Weber had given an interview to a local news station attempting to defend his actions. His excuses only fueled more outrage, with comments pouring in from security professionals condemning his behavior and supporting Elite Aviation's decision to terminate him. Sarah opened her laptop to review her presentation for the Chicago investors, but her mind kept returning to the morning's events. What had started as a personal incident had become a movement. Her inbox was filled with messages from young black professionals sharing how her stance had given them courage. A news alert popped up on her screen. Elite Aviation announces major overhaul of security protocols following discrimination incident. The article detailed immediate changes, including the implementation of SecureFlow's bias-free verification systems across all terminals. Looking out the jet's window at the vast expanse of clouds below, Sarah thought about how one moment of standing firm against discrimination had sparked such widespread change. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from a young black girl. "Dear Ms. Mitchell, I want to be a pilot, but people say it's not for people like me. After seeing you today, I know they're wrong. Thank you for being brave." Sarah smiled, feeling a mix of emotions. The incident had been painful, but the response showed that society was ready for change. As her jet continued toward Chicago, she began drafting notes for a speech about transforming moments of discrimination into opportunities for progress. This was no longer just about one woman's experience. It had become a catalyst for systemic change in an industry long overdue for transformation. The news of Sarah's experience had reached Chicago before her plane landed. As she descended the steps of the private jet, she noticed several reporters gathered at a respectful distance near the terminal. Their cameras flashed as she walked across the tarmac, her head held high. Inside the Chicago terminal of Elite Aviation, things were noticeably different. The security staff was extremely professional, almost nervous in their politeness. The terminal manager, a woman named Rebecca Patel, was waiting to greet her personally. "Ms. Mitchell," Rebecca said warmly, "welcome to Chicago. I want to assure you that we've already begun implementing new security protocols here. Your experience in our network has sparked immediate change." Sarah's phone buzzed with breaking news. Elite Aviation's board had just announced a comprehensive 5-point plan to address discrimination. The stock market was responding positively to their quick action, with shares beginning to recover from the morning's drop. "Ms. Mitchell," called out a voice. It was Timothy Wong, one of the investors she was scheduled to meet. He had come to the terminal himself to receive her. "I watched everything unfold this morning. Our entire investment team did. We're even more convinced now that Secure Flow Solutions is exactly what the industry needs." As they walked to his waiting car, Timothy continued, "Your handling of that situation showed exactly the kind of leadership we look for. In fact, we'd like to increase our proposed investment by 50%. He paused, checking his phone. "And 3 other investment groups have reached out, wanting to join this funding round." Sarah's personal email inbox had exploded. Among the thousands of messages was one from Harvard Business School, requesting her to be a keynote speaker at their upcoming leadership conference. Another was from Forbes, wanting to feature her on their next cover. Leadership in the Face of Discrimination, the Sarah Mitchell story. The car ride to the downtown meeting was interrupted by a call from Elena Rodriguez. "Sarah, the response to our announcement has been overwhelming. 4 other private aviation companies have reached out about forming an industry coalition for diversity and inclusion. They want you to lead it." Social media continued to buzz. The elderly couple from the morning had given an interview to a national news network, their emotional testimony adding fuel to the growing movement. Their video had been shared millions of times, with people praising their allyship. James Weber had also made another public statement, this time apologizing for his actions. However, his apology included excuses about security protocols and doing his job, which only generated more criticism. Several security training organizations had used clips from the incident as examples of what not to do in customer service. Sarah's mother called again. "Baby, you're on every channel. Your story is giving people hope. The church ladies are organizing a whole prayer group for you." Sarah could hear the pride and emotion in her mother's voice. As they approached the downtown office building, Timothy showed Sarah another trending topic. Elite Aviation's competitors were scrambling to announce their own diversity initiatives. The incident had created a ripple effect across the entire luxury travel industry. "Look at this," Timothy said, showing her his tablet. "Private jet bookings by minority executives have increased 300% since this morning. People are saying if Sarah Mitchell can demand respect in these spaces, so can they." Several major corporations had issued statements severing ties with companies that couldn't demonstrate strong anti-discrimination policies. The business world was rapidly responding to the growing demand for accountability. Before entering the building, Sarah received one more significant message. The White House had taken notice, and she was being invited to join a task force on corporate diversity and inclusion. Her morning of discrimination had evolved into a platform for national change. "Ready?" Timothy asked as they entered the elevator. "The investment team is excited to meet you. Though I should warn you, they might be more interested in talking about this morning's events than your technical presentation." Sarah straightened her blazer and checked her reflection in the elevator's mirrored wall. She was no longer just the CEO of a successful tech company. She had become a symbol of resistance against discrimination in corporate America. The weight of this new responsibility settled on her shoulders, but instead of feeling burdened, she felt empowered. As the elevator climbed toward the meeting floor, Sarah thought about how life could change in just a few hours. What had started as an ugly incident of discrimination had transformed into a movement for change, and she was now at its center. The real work was just beginning. 2 weeks after the incident at Elite Aviation, Sarah sat in her office in downtown Atlanta, reviewing the incredible changes her stand against discrimination had sparked. The wall-mounted TV was playing yet another news segment about the transformation in the private aviation industry. The headline scrolled across the screen. Elite Aviation reports record numbers of minority executives using private services. The news anchor discussed how Sarah's experience had opened up conversations about accessibility and inclusion in luxury travel. "Ms. Mitchell," her assistant Jenny called through the intercom, The new Elite Aviation Board members are here for the Diversity Committee meeting. Sarah smiled, remembering how quickly things had moved. Not only had she joined their board, but she had helped select 3 other minority executives to serve alongside her. The investment meeting in Chicago had been a tremendous success. Instead of the original funding amount, SecureFlow Solutions had received 3 times more investment. The company's bias-free security system was now being implemented not just in aviation, but in luxury hotels, exclusive clubs, and high-end retail stores across the country. Sarah's phone lit up with a message from Rachel Thompson, the influencer who had live-streamed the incident. Just landed at Elite Aviation LA Terminal. You won't believe the changes. Every staff member has completed the new training program. The security manager is a woman of color. Your impact is everywhere. A knock at her office door interrupted her thoughts. It was Marcus Johnson, the pilot from that memorable morning. He had since been promoted to Elite Aviation's Director of Flight Operations, the first black person to hold the position. "Sarah," he said, entering with a folder, "you need to see these statistics. Since implementing the new protocols, customer satisfaction has increased by 40%. Minority clientele has grown by 200%. Other airlines are desperate to copy our model." On her desk lay the latest issue of Forbes magazine with her photo on the cover. The article inside detailed how one woman's courage had transformed an industry. But more importantly, it highlighted the concrete changes that have followed. New hiring practices, anti-bias training programs, and technology-driven security protocols. James Weber's story had taken an unexpected turn. After his termination and failed attempts to defend his actions, he had undergone extensive anti-bias training. Now, surprisingly, he was speaking at corporate events about his journey from discrimination to understanding. His honest acknowledgement of his prejudices and commitment to change had become another powerful part of the narrative. Sarah's phone buzzed again. This time it was Elena Rodriguez, Elite Aviation CEO. "The international expansion is happening faster than we planned," Elena said excitedly. "London, Dubai, and Singapore want our new security systems and training programs. Your experience is creating global change." The elderly couple who had supported Sarah that morning had become unofficial ambassadors for the cause. They had appeared on multiple talk shows, encouraging other privileged travelers to speak up against discrimination. Their sincerity and passion had helped bridge gaps in understanding among Elite Aviation's traditional clientele. "Ms. Mitchell," Jenny interrupted again, "the civil rights organizations are here for the scholarship program meeting." Sarah had established a foundation to help minority entrepreneurs access luxury business services, funded partly by Elite Aviation and other corporate partners who wanted to be part of the solution. As Sarah gathered her materials for the meeting, she glanced at a framed tweet on her wall. It was from that young black girl who wanted to be a pilot. "Update: I just got accepted to flight school. Thank you, Ms. Mitchell, for showing me that no door is closed to us if we're brave enough to face the people who try to block our way." The transformation hadn't been without challenges. Some had criticized the changes as overcorrection or special treatment, but the numbers spoke for themselves. More diverse customers, higher satisfaction rates, and increasing profits. What had begun as a crisis had become a masterclass in how addressing discrimination could benefit everyone. Sarah picked up her father's old watch from her desk, running her fingers over its worn face. "You were right, Dad," she whispered. "Sometimes it takes one person standing their ground to help others find their courage." As she walked to the conference room, Sarah passed a wall of photos showing the recent changes. Diverse security teams, new training sessions, happy customers of all backgrounds enjoying Elite Aviation services. The incident that could have been just another story of discrimination had instead become a catalyst for lasting change, proving that sometimes the worst moments could lead to the best transformations. 1 year after the incident at Elite Aviation, Sarah Mitchell stood at a podium in the company's flagship terminal, addressing a diverse crowd of industry leaders, civil rights activists, and media representatives. The terminal, once the site of her discrimination, had been transformed into a symbol of progress. "1 year ago, I walked through these doors as a customer and faced discrimination," Sarah began, her voice strong and clear. "Today, I stand here as a board member, watching our industry transform. But more importantly, I stand here with proof that change is possible when we confront discrimination with dignity and purpose. The numbers displayed on screens behind her told a powerful story. Elite Aviation's minority clientele had increased by 500% over the past year. Their bias-free security system, developed in partnership with SecureFlow Solutions, had been adopted by over 200 luxury service providers worldwide. In the audience, familiar faces watched with pride. Captain Marcus Johnson, now Elite Aviation's Vice President of Operations, sat beside Jessica Chen, who had been promoted to Regional Director of Customer Relations. Michael Torres had become the company's head of security training, traveling worldwide to implement new protocols. Ms. Mitchell, a reporter called out during the Q&A session, "Your story has inspired similar changes in other industries. How does it feel to see your experience create such widespread impact?" Before Sarah could answer, Elena Rodriguez, Elite Aviation CEO, stepped forward. "Let me share something remarkable," she said. "Last month, our customer satisfaction ratings hit 98%, the highest in our company's history. Diversity hasn't just been good for society, it's been excellent for business." James Weber's transformation had become another powerful part of the story. After months of dedicated learning and self-reflection, he now worked with corporate training programs, sharing his journey from prejudice to understanding. His honest acknowledgement of his past behaviors had helped other people confront their own biases. The elderly couple who had supported Sarah that morning a year ago sat in the front row. They had become prominent advocates for inclusion in luxury spaces, using their privilege to open doors for others. Their dedication had inspired many of their peers to become active allies in the fight against discrimination. Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from the young black pilot in training who had reached out a year ago. Attached was a photo of her first solo flight, with the caption, "Your courage gave me wings. Just completed my first solo flight. Thank you for not backing down that day." The SecureFlow Foundation, established after the incident, had already provided scholarships to 50 minority entrepreneurs, helping them access luxury business services without facing the barriers Sarah had encountered. Many of these entrepreneurs were in attendance, their success stories adding to the day's significance. "The work isn't finished," Sarah continued at the podium, "but we've proven that change is possible. Every person who walks through these doors now, regardless of their appearance, receives the same respectful treatment. That's not special treatment, it's equal treatment." In the terminal's renovated security area, a plaque hung on the wall. "Dignity is not a privilege, it's a right." Below it, screens displayed the new security protocols that had made Elite Aviation a model for inclusive luxury service. Rachel Thompson, the influencer who had documented the original incident, was live streaming again. But this time, she was showing the positive changes. Diverse staff members, respectful security procedures, and a welcoming atmosphere for all clients. As Sarah concluded her speech, she shared one final story. Last week, a young black executive walked into this terminal for her first private flight. She was greeted with respect, processed efficiently, and treated with dignity. She didn't make headlines because that's how it should be. That's what real change looks like. The audience rose in a standing ovation. In just 1 year, an incident of discrimination had transformed into a movement for change, proving that sometimes the worst moments could lead to the best outcomes. Sarah's mother, sitting in the audience, wiped tears from her eyes as she watched her daughter. The watch that had belonged to Sarah's father gleamed on her wrist, a reminder of his words about standing up for what's right. As the applause continued, Sarah looked out at the diverse faces before her. The terminal that had once been a place of exclusion had become a symbol of inclusion. Her story had become more than just a viral moment or a corporate crisis. It had become a blueprint for lasting change, showing that one person's stand against discrimination could open doors for countless others. The end of this story marked the beginning of a new chapter in the industry, where dignity and respect weren't luxuries, but fundamental rights for everyone who walked through those doors.